On March 31st, 1922, an entire family was slaughtered inside a remote farmhouse in Bavaria. 6 people, a grandfather, a grandmother, their daughter, her 2 children, and the new maid, who had arrived just hours earlier. But here's what makes this case different from every other mass murder you've ever heard of. The killer didn't run. They stayed. For 3 full days, the murderer lived inside that farmhouse, eating the family's food, feeding their cattle, warming themselves by the fireplace, all while 6 bodies lay in the barn and the bedrooms. And to this day, over a century later, no one knows who did it. This is the mystery of Hinterkaifeck, and the closer you look, the stranger it gets. The obvious explanation is robbery. A remote farm, an isolated family, a brutal killing. Someone wanted their money. But investigators dismissed that theory almost immediately. When police searched the house, they found a large amount of cash still in the cabinets. The cabinets were never opened. Nothing was stolen. So if not robbery, then what? To understand the horror of what happened, you need to understand the family. And the Grubers were complicated. Andreas Gruber, the 63-year-old patriarch, was not a kind man. In 1915, he and his own daughter Victoria were convicted of incest. He served a year in prison. She served a month. And when Victoria later gave birth to her son, Joseph, many in the village believed the child was not the son of her late husband, but of her own father. The family was known, talked about, whispered about. But before we get to the night of the murders, you need to hear about the days leading up to it. Because something was already inside that house, and the family knew it. 6 months before the murders, the family's maid quit. Her reason? She was hearing strange noises coming from the attic. She believed the house was haunted. A new maid was eventually hired. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She arrived at Hinterkaifeck on the afternoon of March 31st, 1922, the very day of the murders. Her sister walked her there, stayed for a short visit, and left. She was the last person to see the family alive, but in the days before Maria arrived, Andreas had been telling neighbors about disturbing things. First, he found a newspaper from Munich on the property. A newspaper nobody in the household subscribed to. Nobody nearby subscribed to it either. Where did it come from? Then he discovered footprints in the fresh snow. They led from the edge of the forest to a door with a broken lock, a door that led into the farm's machine room. The footprints went in, they never came out. And then the footsteps in the attic. Andreas told neighbors he heard someone walking above him at night. He went up to check. He found nothing, no one. He refused to call the police. He refused help from neighbors. Someone was living in that attic. And Andreas Gruber did nothing. Think about that. You hear footsteps above your head. You know there's no way into your attic from outside. You find footprints that enter your property and never leave. And you do nothing, unless you already knew who it was. On the night of March 31st, the killer came down from the attic. The family was lured to the barn, one by one, through the stable. Andreas, his wife Kazilia, their daughter Victoria, and little 7-year-old Kazilia. Each one was killed with a mattock, a heavy farm tool similar to a pickaxe, with devastating blows to the head. Then the killer walked into the living quarters. 2-year-old Joseph was sleeping in his bassinet. The killer struck him in his sleep. Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, was in her bedchamber. She had been in that house for less than a day. The killer struck her too, 6 people, all dead. And then, the killer didn't leave. Evidence showed that someone stayed at Hinterkaifeck for several days after the murders. The cattle were fed, the entire supply of bread in the kitchen was eaten, meat was recently cut from the pantry, the fireplace was used. Someone lived there, comfortably, as if they belonged. And here's the detail that haunts investigators to this day. When 7-year-old Kazilia's body was examined, they discovered something heartbreaking. She had been alive for several hours after the attack. In the straw next to the bodies of her mother and grandparents, the little girl had torn out her own hair in tufts. She lay there, conscious, for hours. And whoever was in the house, eating bread, feeding animals, warming by the fire, they heard her. They knew she was there. They did nothing. When neighbors finally discovered the bodies on April 4th, 4 days after the murders, the crime scene was immediately contaminated. Neighbors walked through the house, moved bodies, cooked meals in the kitchen before police arrived. But even with a compromised scene, investigators had suspects. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Victoria's lover. When he arrived at the farm to investigate the family's disappearance, he broke through a locked gate to enter the barn, but after finding the bodies, he apparently unlocked the front door of the house without issue. A key had gone missing from the Gruber household days before the murders. How did he have a key? Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, officially killed in World War I in 1914. His body was never recovered. Some villagers claim to have seen him after his reported death. Was he really dead? Or did he come back? The Gump brothers, members of a far-right paramilitary group, their own sister confessed on her deathbed that they had committed the murders. In 2007, 15 police academy students re-examined the case using modern techniques. They all independently agreed on who the main suspect was. But the suspect's name was never released, out of consideration for his living descendants. The case was officially closed in 1955. The last interrogations took place in 1986. No one was ever charged. 100 years later, the farm is gone. Demolished in 1923 to erase the memory. A small concrete monument stands where it once stood. But the questions remain: who was living in that attic? Why didn't Andreas call for help? Why did the killer stay for days? Were they looking for something? Hiding from someone? Or did they simply enjoy it? And the most disturbing question of all: in 1927, 5 years after the murders, a stranger stopped a resident of the nearby village at midnight. He asked questions about the killings. Then, in the darkness, he loudly announced, "I am the murderer of Hinterkaifeck." He turned, he walked into the forest, and he was never seen again. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe, because next week we're covering a case even darker than this one.